Last Sunday, we saw Jesus presenting himself as the suffering servant who would be rejected, humiliated, and killed. Following the prediction of his passion, Jesus asked his followers to take up their crosses. Now, as Jesus continued to travel to Jerusalem to face his suffering, he makes another pronouncement, the second prediction of the passion. He tells the people again, this is the second time. It is 3 times that he warned them about it. And he was anxious to explain to them what is going to happen. These things that are going to happen, he was anxious to explain the meaning to them. Because the meaning of the things that are going to happen, the suffering, death, and resurrection, that is the purpose of his coming. The entire coming to the world as man is in order to fulfill those circumstances. So he needed to make sure that the disciples understood it very clearly. But as Mark reports, these guys did not understand anything. The disciples did not understand a thing. Now, Jesus contradicts their understanding of his identity and his mission. Up to this time, what did the disciples understand about Jesus? That he is a miracle worker. I mean, they really enjoyed, they were filled with euphoria about the fact that he is a miracle worker. 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed 5,000. Wow, fantastic. They understood that he is one who raises the dead. Even Lazarus was dead, and he said, Lazarus, come out, and he came out. Wonderful. They felt wonderful because they are the privileged successors of such a wonderful person, such a glorious king. They knew he was the Messiah, but they were expecting that it is a political Messiah that will have a lot of political power to conquer the Romans that were occupying Israel at the time. And they thought about themselves as people who will be in serious positions. And against the false ideas making the rounds about his identity and mission, Jesus presents himself today once again as the suffering servant, whose life is characterized by humble service, humility and service, whose life is exemplified in the cross. That is the kind of Messiah that Jesus presents himself. Now, the apostles did not understand. They were having another understanding of power. Now, how many of you can see the picture very clearly? The picture I have there. Can you see that there is somebody who is the footstool of the king? There's a human being that the king, who is the footstool. The Bible talks about, I will make my enemies my footstool. So the big guy, the big king is there, and there is a human being that is there, and he has his legs on top of him. That is how to control people, to have power in the world. Now, the disciples did not understand the future powerlessness because they were thinking of this kind of king that Jesus was going to be. This kind. And when Jesus talks of powerlessness, it means that not only he will be powerless, but they, his followers, will also be powerless. They were afraid to ask him. They were afraid to ask him what he meant, because perhaps their worst expectations may come true. Their worst fears may replay. In fact, perhaps Jesus meant exactly what he was saying, and they did not want to take that chance. There are many people, including some of you here, who will not go for medical examination because you are afraid of what will come out. Are you familiar with such people? I know people who, when they say, go and do medical test, go and do medical examination, they don't go. Why? Because then they feel one kind somehow, and they don't want the doctor to confirm their fear. So instead they stay away. Now, they were afraid to ask him because they guessed that perhaps he means what he's saying. So they rather remain. And what did they do? They decided to distract themselves with another discussion. And the discussion they were having is exact opposite of what Jesus was talking about. They began to have discussion about who was the greatest, who was the most important, who will have the highest position in this new kingdom that Jesus was going to bring. You know what Peter said? Peter said, why is there any discussion about this? It's clear now. It's clear that when Jesus Christ becomes the president, I'm the prime minister. It's clear. I mean, there should be no contention about this. And Philip said, what are you talking about? When there was serious problem, and even Jesus did not know what to do, was I not the one who solved the problem? When Jesus had these 5,000 people to feed, and all of you were just moping, nobody knew what to do, and Jesus turned to me, did I not use my ingenuity and brought the boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish, which Jesus used to feed 5,000? Don't you know that Jesus will need somebody like that as his right hand? So you, Peter, you are only figurehead leader. When it comes to difficult situations, I am the one. Philip said, I am the one. Then John said, what are you guys talking about? If you are talking of somebody who is close to the heart of Jesus, who is it? If not me. You can only supply food. You can only. But if you are talking of somebody who is close to the heart of Jesus, who is it? It is not me. And they began to argue, and others began to, the thing was getting rowdy. It was becoming easy. Then Jesus' attention was called. And Jesus asked them, what are you guys arguing about? What were you arguing about? And they kept quiet. Why did they keep quiet? They were ashamed because of what they were arguing about. They were ashamed. They knew that what they were arguing about does not fit into the logic of Jesus Christ. So they kept quiet. It showed how little they had learned from Jesus after 3 years. It showed how little they understood the mission and the message of Jesus. In the midst of the silence, as they kept silent, Jesus Christ went out, I believe, and brought a little child. And put that little, this is not a child he went to pick from the palace or from a big house. Must have been one of these children running around the streets with their nose dropping, dirty looking. Went to bring that child and put it before them. And he challenged them to welcome and accept this little one. In this little child that Jesus put before them, he challenged them to welcome or accept what? 1, powerlessness. 2, helplessness. 3, weakness. 4, meekness. 5, vulnerability. These are the words that we all hate. If we are sincere with ourselves. Abi? We dislike these words. Powerlessness. In fact, when you see a lot of Christians gathering, that are gathered, the song they like to sing most are the ones that talk about power. Isn't it? Power. When Christians are gathered for prayer meeting, for big vigil, then go and look for the number of songs they will sing that talk about what? Power. Because that's the one we want. That's the one we want. That's the one that satisfies our inner craving. But this is what Jesus is talking about when he brings that little child. Powerlessness, helplessness, weakness, meekness, vulnerability. Now, true greatness, Jesus Christ says, true greatness has a quality of simplicity about it that children have naturally. Somebody spoke about a child being simple. True greatness has a quality of simplicity, and that quality of simplicity, children have it naturally. They don't have to make an effort like I have to make an effort. Children are known for 1, simplicity of heart. 2, openness of mind. 3, acceptance of others. 4, innocent goodness. 5, straightforwardness. Talking about innocent goodness. You know that many of us are very good. Now, but the goodness of many of us adults may be crooked, may not be that innocent. Now, these 58 people who are looking for governorship on Anambra, there will be a lot of philanthropy going on now. A lot of philanthropy will be going, people will be going to their villages and setting up borehole. These poor people, let me make a little road here, let me make a little borehole here. Good, right? That's goodness. But it is with a purpose. Isn't it? It is with something in view. That goodness is not innocent goodness. That goodness, the people need the borehole, so it's good. But that goodness is not innocent goodness. It's with a hidden agenda. So that when he comes 3 months' time to ask for their votes, they will remember that he did this borehole. So, innocent goodness. When you see a child and a child say, give me that sweet or give me that cookie you're holding, and the child gives it to you, the child forgets after 3 minutes that he gave you anything, right? The child is not expecting something from you to give you that. It gives you, and it is innocent. Straightforwardness. Somebody had already mentioned straightforwardness. As we go older, unfortunately, we tend to become crooked. We tend to start getting crooked. But the child is straightforward. You know, you tell your child, I'm going to lie down. When anybody comes to visit me, tell them that I am not in. When somebody knocks, the child opens the door. Where is your mommy? He said, mommy say I should tell you that she is not in. Straightforward, right? Until as the child grows older, we teach the child that when I ask you to say I am not in, even though I am in, tell them that mommy is not in. It takes a number of years before the child can make that distinction. By then you have taught the child how to tell lie well. So when when somebody now knocks and says, where is your mommy or where is your daddy, and the child now, when the child is grown up at about 7, 8, 9, the child now says, mommy is not in. Are you sure? He said, yes. That child has been thoroughly schooled in telling lies. That child has lost his innocence, right? That child has lost his innocence. And unfortunately, many of us grow up losing our innocence. Someday I will read my poem that I wrote about the loss of my innocence. I wrote that poem about the age of 33 when I looked at my childhood and I looked at where I was at 33 and I said, oh, why did I grow up? If growing up means losing childlike innocence. Children by nature are unpretentious. They are without guile. They are without guilt. A child plays with a colleague and then something happens and they fight. 5 minutes after that, they are playing together because there's no guile. There's nothing, no hidden agenda, no nothing. The child also, because he's innocent, does not have guilt. Actually, what is destroying many of us is guilt. Many human beings live through each day in guilt. Many people are in guilt over what they did 15 years ago, 25 years ago. And because each one of us has some conscience left, the terrible things we did in the past continue to haunt us. Only me. Continue to haunt us, and when it haunts us, it makes us sick, you know. A lot of the sicknesses and diseases that we have can be linked to guilt, unaddressed guilt. Thank God that in the Catholic Church we have the sacrament of reconciliation that deals with guilt, that assures us that God has forgiven us. Thank God that Jesus Christ teaches us how to ask for and offer forgiveness, so that we may not live each day with guilt. But many people live with guilt, and it causes all kinds of problems. Psychosomatic, from being emotional and psychological to being physiological. May the Lord heal us of guilt so that our bodies too may be healed. Good. Children don't plot, they don't scheme, they don't conspire, they don't connive, they don't attempt to deceive or betray others, which we as adults do very well. I mean, somebody mentioned politics and economy and business. I mean, many of you read when there was a major problem between Dangote and AP, right? You remember? And over stocks. The accusation that one company was scheming and conniving and plotting to make the shares of another company collapse. Did you read that? So a lot of conniving, a lot of scheming and plotting between one company and the other, one bank and the other, so that our own shares will rise and their own shares will go down and everybody will come and buy my shares. Anyway, some of the mess that went on in our banks we are beginning to see now, unfortunately. Children don't get into those. Children accept themselves as little. A little child says, come little boy. He comes. He doesn't say that I am not little. Children want to learn and they need to learn, but also want to learn. All of us adults need to learn, but do we often want to learn? No, so that's what my little child just said about teachability. Children are teachable. Children are curious about life, and because they are curious about life, they ask a lot of questions. They see life as a mystery and ask a lot of questions. And now Jesus likens himself to and his kingdom to the little powerless child who cannot resort to power tactics when he is threatened or maltreated, who cannot defend himself or herself, whose only protection and defense is the Father. When the disciples are able to welcome or accept the little powerless one, then they can welcome and accept Jesus. It is only when the disciples can accept this and all that this child stands for. The child before them is only a symbol. All that the child stands for, powerlessness, meekness, innocent goodness, and so on. When they are able to accept all that, that is when they accept Jesus. But let's say, think about it seriously, my friends. That is very difficult. In a world of power, in a world of prestige, in a world of influence, in a world where nobody looks at you if you have no money, in a society where nobody looks at you if you have no power, to be comfortable with powerlessness is hard. Not so? To be comfortable with powerlessness is hard. Yet, Jesus is showing us that that is the way of the kingdom. Jesus' complete trust in the Father makes him vulnerable like a child. Unless the disciples embrace that vulnerability, they will never understand the way of Jesus Christ. Now, in putting the child before his disciples and before us, Jesus leaves us a permanent challenge. It is not just a challenge for them in those days, it is also a challenge for us today. What are they? Number one, to welcome the powerlessness of a child as the way of the kingdom. Two, to relate with the Father with the openness and trust of a little child. Three, to take to heart the weakest and neediest members of the community. We saw that in Acts of Apostles chapter 2 verse 35 to 32 to 35. How the early Christian community took to heart the weakest members of the community and took care of them. 4, to recognize that power and prestige are not a model of Christian discipleship, but rather vulnerability and service. And so if there are priests, if there are pastors, if there are knights of the church, senior people who are showing their wealth as evidence of their closeness to God, they got it wrong. Do you understand that? If there are Christians who decide that they are showing their wealth as evidence of their closeness to God, or the evidence of God's love for them, that is the wrong message. It's actually opposite message. I read a book not long ago, a couple of years ago, on this issue. And it says that every generation has its demon. And that the demon of our generation is the prosperity gospel. Rather hard, but there's some truth to it. It says every generation has its demon, but that the demon of our generation is the prosperity gospel. Why? Because it is so contradictory to the gospel of Christ. The prosperity gospel is so contradictory to the gospel of Christ, and Nigerians are being swept by it. Everyone is falling for it because it fits our natural craving, and Nigerians are going in their millions to embrace that power, prestige, wealth. If you are serving the Lord, he will bless you. Look at my private jet as evidence of the fact that I am succeeding. I am close to the Lord. Hey, be careful. Let us be careful. Because the fact that 50 million people believe that does not make it right. Do you understand what I'm saying? The fact that 50 million people believe that doesn't make it right. And Nigerians are being swept every day by it. Just read this. Read the gospel of last Sunday, of today. Read the gospel of last Monday and Tuesday. And see. The message is very clear. To understand that true greatness consists in being the last of all and the servant of all. Like the disciples, you and I, we too are often plagued by inordinate ambition. We have our ambitions for power and for prestige. We want places of honor. We want places of honor. We want to be the center of attraction. We want to rule others, to control others, to lord it over others, to dominate others, even to manipulate others. We want to be served by others. We don't want to serve others. These inordinate ambitions, according to St. James, they spring from some conflict inside us. That there is already some conflict inside us. And there are conflicts of selfishness and greed and the lust for power inside us that cause all this. These emotions result in ruthless and aggressive competition. Inordinate ambitions result in what? Ruthless. And my secretary, for many years, I have a secretary who has been my secretary for about 18 years. And he's in his late 60s. And when I was finishing from the Catholic Secretariat, he went home to his hometown to compete for chairman of the local government. He comes from the same local government as General Abisoye. And General Abisoye came to him in the Secretariat when he was going, came to him in my office and said, I hear you want to go and do politics. He said, yes. Said, are you a politician? Hey, he said, but somebody has to begin now. He said, can you fight in public? You are a gentle person. I have known you since. How can you go into politics? He said, you can't do it. General Abisoye told him, you cannot do it. He said, but sir, somebody has to go and try. He said, better listen to me. It is not for people like you. Anyway, my secretary did not listen. When I finished from the secretariat and went to Germany, he went home to do politics. By the time I came from Germany, my secretary came back to me. I said, what happened? He said, Father, it's rough out there. Father, it's rough out there. What happened? The young boys in the village told him, you better go back to work for Father George because you don't belong here. You can't do the things we do. Please go back to where you are coming from. You don't belong here. What he saw, just local government or not state governor, what he saw. Now, ruthless, aggressive competition. We are doing that in business. You know, when we finished with consolidation of banks in this country and we had only 25 banks with 25 billion and so on, we thought that we had finished with ruthless competition, right? That is when serious, aggressive something began. We thought we had finished. I'm one of those who was writing against this, sending young ladies all over the place to be looking for deposits and looking for deposits from very lustful and promiscuous women all over the place who are turning them to prostitutes. I'm one of those who was constantly writing and making advocacy against it. So when with the consolidation, we thought that this problem will be over. The thing just begin. Ruthless. In fact, they are having seminars. Many organizations have seminars to learn how to be aggressive. Aggressive became a very wonderful word, isn't it? In Nigerian business, how to be aggressive. And if you go for an interview for a job and you don't look aggressive, you don't impress, no matter how intelligent you are, you don't impress the guys. Now, but aggressive competition destroys human relationships and societies. Aggressive competition may bring you money, may bring you profits, but it destroys human relationships and it destroys societies. Aggressive competition binds us to the world of violence rather than binding us to the God of peace. Aggressive competition brings division. It brings conflict. It brings persecution of the just. The one who is now just and doing the correct thing will be persecuted. It brings violence and death. Now, this is what I would like you to do a little workshop on. Say this after me, and I ask you to please put it in your, memorize it. What you compete to get, you will compete to keep. For others will compete to snatch from you what you competed to grab from them. Dr. Njoko, you like that one? What you compete to get, you will compete to keep. For others will compete to snatch from you what you competed to grab from them. Oh yeah, make you discuss that one. Discuss it. Okay. It's a hard message. It's a difficult one. But for me, that is the truth of Jesus Christ. No compromise. Jesus never gave room for any compromise about this.